Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Kettle Moraine Lutheran High School. Welcome to all of our viewers that are joining us virtually today as well. Thanks for joining us online, and thanks for being here. I guess first off, we'll acknowledge the obvious. We're here having an athletic meeting, which is pretty exciting, right? It's pretty awesome that we're here. We've committed this far, so we pray that we'll continue to gain momentum here as we head into the fall season. Thank you again for being here. There were 2 handouts when you came in. We'll be posting everything online as well for those of you watching online. Just 2 things we'll reference throughout. Number 1, the schedule's in flux, so that's the reason for the sheet with all the QR codes on it. The second one is the athletic handbook. That's really the main focus of this meeting. We'll go through high points in the athletic handbook. I certainly will not bore you with covering every single detail of the handbook. It is posted online, should you wish to view it at home, or obviously you have it in your hands as well. So questions, first off, we'll save questions for the end. So I like to get through the presentation first. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can simply leave us a comment and we'll write down the questions and we'll do our best to get to all of them at the end of this. My name is Joe Griefkes. This is my 4th year as the activities director at KML. My privilege to serve you. My faithful assistant is standing in the back, Mrs. Amy Nass. She'll be your athletic contact for a lot of things. We'll reference some of that as we go through the presentation here. We do have a microphone set up, so when you come up to the microphone, just flick it on if you're the first person and leave it on. Leave your mask on, please, as well, and we'll just leave the mic right where it's at. I like to always start at the end. So we start with our exit outcomes. If you took a tour of KML, which I'm assuming most of you did, Mr. Zemer went through our exit outcomes with you. These are all attributes that we fast forward 4 years, and these are things that we hope and pray that all of your children continue to grow and to build in. Growing and proclaiming Christians is a huge one. KML is different, obviously. You've decided to enroll your children here for a different reason. They're self-directed and lifelong learners, collaborative contributors, discerning thinkers, servant leaders, and dedicated stewards. We're going to focus on the first one, which is a big one, servant leadership. You think about your kids from an early age on. How did they learn? They learn by watching you, right? Modeling your behavior. And so our teachers and our coaches have that same high calling to make sure that we are being Christian role models, that we're demonstrating integrity, empathy, patience, kindness, and so on. We always start with service. We believe that you have to serve others first. And that doesn't mean we neglect ourselves, but it's a focus on others, that we put their needs above our own needs, and we go out of our way to serve, to speak the truth in love, and to do the right thing according to God's word. So welcome again to KML. We're blessed to be able to serve you. Student athletes who are here, from day one, you're going to hear your teachers say it often, we're encouraging you to be leaders. That's a big mission of our school, is to train you in leadership principles, how to go out into the real world once you get beyond high school, and whether you go into the trades or college, how to be a leader in our world. So parents and athletes, as you're in the stands, we're going to ask that you support all the participants, cheer loud, support our officials, our leaders, our coaches. Matthew 5:16 is a solid passage for us. It talks about letting our light shine. It talks about how others are watching us, and we have that high calling to be representative of our Lord and Savior who's given us so much. And so that's part of our mission here, is to let our light shine as others are in our building, watching athletic events or fine arts or what have you, and that they'll understand who we are and why we are different. If you have issues or concerns, they'll come up. There's going to be high points, right? And there'll be points where you have questions, you have concerns, you have things that maybe need to be discussed with coaches, with the athletic director, with teachers. And so I'd like you to always remember to start with the person who the issue is with, who you have that concern with. We're here to serve you in our activities office, so feel free to reach out to us whenever you need anything. Just thinking about if the issue does start with a coach, we'd ask that you go to that coach first. If it's a freshman level coach, start there. Kind of next in line would be the varsity head of the program. And then as you continue, you may still have issues. Certainly feel free to bring them to me. You guys all have my email address. My cell phone's out there floating in the world. So I want anything but you not to contact me. I certainly want the comments, the questions, the concerns. Especially this year as we try to navigate through all sorts of different things. Obviously, you'll have more questions than ever before. I'd like to say I have all the answers. I think you know that reality. I don't have all the answers for you at this point in time, but as soon as we continue to learn. We will bring our info to you as fast as we can. So I'll start with some of the big ticket items, KML's COVID response and our guiding principles. Honestly, I wanted to have a whole lot of work done months ago. It's kind of how it's been the last 6 or 7 months, hasn't it been? We want to get stuff out, and we have markers that keep pushing us back. And so I just want you to know a few things about KML, what we have done. We've obviously invested a lot of time in leadership training, hours and hours of meetings over the summer, lots of policy writing, handbooks, and lots of listening. We've invested in a cleaner, healthier school. Literally thousands of dollars have gone into more cleaning supplies, more staff, masks for our student athletes, choir, the list goes on and on, signage around school. And so we're going to continue to make wise changes as our times change and as change is necessitated. Just a reminder, when you're here and this is school, this is any of our athletic events that, as of right now, obviously we're following the governor's orders and masks are required indoors. Just an important point to bring to your attention is that outdoors, it is a strong recommendation, so when social distancing is not possible, and so we're not going to go beyond what the mandate says, which is masks are strongly recommended outdoors. As we get into this a little bit later, too, we'll talk about how KML is handling fans and what some of our specific policies are concerning events and competition. A key piece that we're waiting on is happening this week. The WI Board of Control has had several meetings, and they're having the big one on August 14th. They have basically told all of us, we appreciate your questions, but hold your horses. We don't have a final decision for you yet. They've decided to focus more on return-to-play guidelines. Everything I've seen from them, from a social media push to conversations I've had with executive staff, has led me to believe nothing other than the fact that they want fall sports to happen. Everything we've heard leads us to believe that. And so we really believe they want to find a way to do it safely. But the reality is that August 14th, that is the date when they'll decide what is going to exactly happen with the fall season. They'll put out return-to-play guidelines. They're actually calling them considerations because they don't feel that it's solely their role to just write policy and tell us what to do. So they're giving us the freedom. Local administration, obviously, we're going to stay within those guidelines, but they're enabling us to continue to lead. So we get to have a hand in this as well. Once our return-to-play plan is complete, that will be all over our kmlhs.org website, kmlchargers.com. You'll see it on social media. So we'll get it out to you as soon as we can. It'll be attached into our KML Kickstart plan if any of you have been reading that throughout these months. Our competition philosophy is we want to compete as much as feasible and safe this fall season. So I can tell you some tangible things that have happened already as we've met with our conference and as we've listened to guidelines from others. First of all, a greater focus on conference competition. So soccer and volleyball, you're going to see some changes in conference competition. We know that freshmen and JV quads, which there's a few of them throughout the year for volleyball, those have been canceled. Obviously, we've lost a few football games. Cross country, girls golf are probably the most unaffected right now. They get to start their practices on time, whereas our other fall sports, I'm sure you're aware, we've got a pushback start date to September 7th. We want to make sure that we can retain a level of non-conference competition as well. Everything the WIA has said, the CDC has said, has referred to a greater focus on regional sport competition. And so even as we look at the WIA postseason, it's very likely that they'll talk about regional crossover with other conferences. There may not be sectional play. There may not be state play this fall season. The WIA has not said that yet, but there is a stronger focus on regional competition. Our conference has met several times, and we've talked about that same thing. However, our conference, by the nature of the giant conference we're in, we are in 4 different counties. And so just by being in the conference, obviously it's a little different than some of your other conferences in the bigger cities. And so we've talked through those realities. We are hoping that with the higher risk sports, we're able to maintain some non-conference competition when it makes sense. And with the lower risk sports, we're going to maintain it a good amount of non-conference. And so you may be seeing some guiding principles. What's out there is 4 schools or less is kind of becoming a popular theme. Some of our volleyball invites, obviously, I think some of you know this, there'll be 30-plus schools. I don't think you're going to see that in Wisconsin this fall. Everything I've heard from your bigger schools to your smaller schools has alluded to encouraging quads and lower and non-conference competition in your area. So those are going to be some guiding principles. And we're trying not to paint ourselves into a corner because there's not a one-shoe-fits-all for this scenario. Cross-country competition, obviously outside with less competitors, we can restructure things to make that a safe event. And so we're going to be as creative as we can. It is not our goal just to carte blanche cancel all sorts of things. Obviously, we've had enough of that. And so we're doing our best to make sure we can retain competition. And I guess please know that some of it's outside of our control. Obviously, some other schools are making decisions and continue to flood my email inbox every day with this is canceled and that's canceled. And so we're also looking at creative ways to create new competition. So as we lose multiple girls' golf meets or what have you, we're trying to find a way to change and maybe get some more conference competition or pursue some other schools that are local in our area. So far, the North Shore, which is a bigger conference by us, I believe they're still maintaining the same philosophy as us, which is they want to engage in non-conference competition as well. We want fans at our games, and so we're going to come up with a plan for that. We want you to be there. We want you to be able to cheer your student-athletes on. Please understand indoor and outdoor, obviously different worlds. And so again, we'll talk about guiding principles as we talk about fans on our campus. So these are general guidelines that you see up on the screen right now. 2 fans per student-athlete for indoor higher-risk sports. That's something that a lot of schools are looking at. Some schools have put a number on it. We've tried to not go that route just because we feel like our parents and those fans who are invested can faithfully manage this. Obviously, it's like anything. We'll have a plan. We'll get started, and we'll see how it goes. So right now, we're planning on 2 fans per student-athlete for indoor higher-risk sports, 4 fans per student-athlete for outdoor higher-risk/lower-risk sports. I will tell you that there is a climate within the conference to not micromanage outdoor as much, to make it like the rest of society where it's outdoors, and we're going to perhaps mark bleachers off and take other measures, but also allowing fans to still be at events. So if your first concern is, what about grandpa, grandma, what about aunt, uncle, we're going to find a way to be able to make that happen. And obviously the hope is that as we go from fall and into the winter season that there's perhaps a little more flexibility, and we'll certainly keep you up to date on that. Right now as we start school, I think most of you are aware, we are starting the school with temperature checks at the door. We're going to have multiple points of access, and so we're following that same model for athletic events. Providing more space. We have portable bleachers, if you don't know that. We've got two big sections in the gymnasium, and so we'll plan to use them for varsity events just to provide more space for indoor stuff. Outdoor, obviously, 84 acres gives us a good amount of space. Our athletes' masks are already coming. We're considering a piece of the uniform to further unify our athletes. We want to look together. We want to look united, obviously, part of the point of a uniform. And so the masks for the student athletes, as they're in facilities, outside facilities, those athletic masks, again, we're going to consider them part of the uniform, and we have ordered them for them. Cross country is one sport that's going to start, already knowing what the recommendations are from the WIA. They're going to start with gaiters for that sport, where athletes will have them on at the start line. They'll get running, they'll pull them down, and then they'll put them on as they need to. Football is obviously up in the air. Our football players, I feel like I can strongly say they're not wearing masks under their helmets. So the gaiter is something that's potentially being looked at as well. But again, the WIA is going to give us considerations as we plan for these sports. And so I don't want to say too much until that comes out. Then I feel like I can share more at that point. All right, the handbook, which is in your hands or you're able to view online, is outlined. Again, I'm not going to cover all this, but as we go through the slides, you'll be able to see what pages I'm referencing so that you can follow along with us. If you do have questions, I encourage you, if you're here in person or at home, to write them down just so you don't forget them. So we've got a lot of offerings here at KML. What a blessing we continue to grow. I'm a KML alumni, and so I can tell you there was nowhere near as much when I was here as a student athlete. We have 15 sport offerings and 34 separate squads. We continue to add. Boys soccer at a freshman level and boys baseball a freshman level recently, so those were 2 recent adds. And we'll continue to look at other sports. Our student athletes have a hand in this. They get to be part of the sport proposal process where we survey our student population. We continue to look at the needs of our school and what's obviously changing in the sport world as well. There are sport fees. You see them there in front of you, and so they have not been increased. They've been the same fees for some time. So this year we're obviously investing even more money just because we feel we need to with sanitation stations and masks for our student athletes, and the list goes on. And so blessed to continue to be able to do those things. Admission is honestly, I put a slide up here, but if I'm honest, this is up for discussion. What's the best way to take admission? Putting volunteers at the helm of being the first point of contact, we're looking at what is the feasibility of that, because that's been the traditional model. And so we're trying to find creative ways to be able to do that. And so more information will be coming. The ECC is looking at whether, honestly, they charge admission at all, especially in this fall season. So KML is looking at those things, which I'm sure you guys you're okay to hear that, right? Right now we do charge, so I'll kind of give you the status quo. We charge at home contests for volleyball, football, basketball, and then some of our tournaments. Generally at this meeting we'd say we have all sports passes for sale. We have family and individual passes. We have grandparents passes, which are free. Right now we don't, so as more info comes out, we will communicate what the admissions policy is and whether we have passes available or not. The ECC is looking at potentially going to a ticket sort of route. And so before we say too much, we want to wait for that decision to come down. 2 really important websites, and KMLchargers.com is the obvious one to start at. I should note that the ECC website, obviously that's embedded in all of our websites. If you go to KMLchargers.com, they upgraded, so our hosts upgraded our site a couple years back, and so they changed some of the information. Now you have to, so if you can't find something, look under the More tab. The More tab has all sorts of information. So it's kind of a little more buried than we would like it to be, but just know you should be able to find everything there. The ECC website is linked into our main school calendar. So when you go on kmlhs.org or kmlchargers.com or the Our School app, which I would highly recommend that you download, you have all the information that you need in front of you, and it's always up to date because it's tied into the contracts. So any athletic contract that comes through, as I consider for the schedule, basically as I make a change or other ADs make changes, the contracts live update the schedule. So paper, bad. Stay far away from paper, especially this year. Everything electronic is going to be your go-to source. I referenced the Our School app. So it's called the Activity Scheduler or Our School. It depends on, obviously, what platform you're searching from. If you have an issue finding it, certainly let me know. Transportation details are tied in there, what time the bus is leaving. On-campus stuff, what room things are located in, what fields, so on and so forth. Basically, it's the go-to spot. Everything schedule-wise is going to be at that main school calendar. Charger Club is our booster club, I guess you could say. They're our big support group. They support, it goes beyond KML athletics, but they mainly focus on athletics, but also KML activities would be the proper term. We want to remind you that all parents are part of the Charger Club. Whether you come to the meetings and are actually an officer or not, we have lots of ways throughout the year to get involved, and so we highly encourage you to take advantage of some of them. Every 2 years, we have new officers coming into those positions who help decide some of the bigger events that we have here, our Kettle Clomp, which is our 5K event, our trivia night, other events. If our teams are going to state or something to that extent, those support groups get involved with signs and banners and fundraisers and all sorts of special things. So we're very thankful for them and how they promote KML. Pages 4 to 6 focus on our student athletes. Dual participation is a big one. So what dual participation means is if you are a KML girls volleyball player that you owe allegiance to KML high school volleyball, and so you cannot be involved in club volleyball at the exact same time. Now, don't be confused. Once our volleyball season is done, you can certainly play club volleyball. So this dual participation has to do with basically being in a club sport and a school-sponsored sport at the same time. So that pertains to every sport. Sports specialization is obviously becoming more and more popular in our society, which is the focus on just one sport all year round, and certainly not saying anything against it, but we do encourage multi-sport athletes. Very blessed to have lots of 2- and 3-sport athletes here at KML, and we're going to continue to encourage those things. The WIA has all sorts of social media posts that they put out as well. I'm not going to click on that one right now, but it's one that certainly encourages multi-sport participation. Our students should refer to our standards of behavior section from time to time, just so we start with a good foundation, a good baseline to know what's expected of you as a student athlete, because it is a little different, obviously, than being a grade school athlete. High school has a few more criteria and stipulations. We refer to them as training rules. So they're the expectations we have of our student athletes, and they are in effect year-round. Summer as well. So as long as you're enrolled as a KML student, from day one to the day you graduate, training rules are in effect. And so it really talks about some of those things I referenced at the beginning, what we expect of our student athletes pertaining to Christian behavior and being leaders in our school. We do have a quitting policy. Now, this is always a gray area, obviously. You could be a couple days into tryouts. We wouldn't consider that quitting. I would just reference that section and just make sure you read over it. So it's more the situations where a month and a half of the season's been going on. There's some situation that happens, and the quitting is basically unwarranted. KML does have a policy that we're going to sit down, we're going to meet, we're going to learn about the situation and what led to it. There have been some situations where student athletes have been held out of other things due to the circumstances of quitting, just because of the reality that it affects the team. Obviously, it affects your fellow athletes, it affects your coaches, it affects the program. In our handbook, we have 2 different classifications, if you will. So we have unbecoming conduct, and then we have conduct violations. And so the unbecoming conduct, that's hazing, truancy, you haven't handed in an assignment in several weeks, that's unbecoming conduct. Violations would be off-campus drinking, drug abuse, things of that extent. And so there are different penalties that go along with those different categories. Not fun to talk about. Obviously, you don't want to ever have to enforce them as activities director, but these are some realities. And so the first offense is 20%. Second could be up to 50%, and then the third or fourth, depending, could lead to removal from the program. Again, not fun things to talk about. We don't hope we ever have to implement them, but just need you to know they're out there. I think I already hit on point number 1 there, and point 2, just that it's all co-curricular activities, not just athletics. And then out-of-season violations, so if it happens in the summer, or even out of your sports season, it pertains to the next season that you're involved in. And so if the violation happens during football, the football season is ending, that's going to tie into the next sport or the next activity. Social media use, obviously, something that our student athletes, parents, staff, and alike have to be very wise about how we use. And so we want all of our social media to be used in a God-pleasing manner. Please make sure your posts represent our school well, your program well, your fellow athletes well, and make sure that they're not damaging to their reputation. WIA and KML, obviously, we're certainly involved in all the positives of social media, and naturally, part of my role is I have to be involved in the negative times, believe it or not, when social media is not used properly. We'd encourage you to report any social media misuse that you might see. We try to do a good job of making sure we're patrolling all of our comment sections and whatnot as live posts go out. But obviously this continues to grow more and more as we do more social media. We would encourage you to follow us. We are on about every platform possible. If you need any of our hashtags or our information, you should be able to find it out there. Just one more plea to our student athletes. Just remember as you're here and as you're on the road that how you act represents our school. And if we are acting in unbecoming ways, or positive ways really, it comes back to our school, which is a blessing. I remember we had a really awesome football game with Winneconne. Some of you listening might remember that 3 years ago. And it's always great when you get that news. Man, was that awesome to hear good news and get to talk with all the families involved about how great our kids treated each other and how much excitement was surrounding that particular game. So it's not just the negative. Risk management, pages 6 to 8. Basically, I guess the key thing here is make sure you have your paperwork in. August 1st is kind of the soft deadline. The hard deadline would be the first day that practice begins. So if you're in one of those fall sports that got pushed back, you do have a little more time. The WIA has tried to make an allowance if you've had issues getting in for physical and such things. If you are in that boat, make sure that you talk with myself or Mrs. Nass. We would encourage you to continue to try and get in as fast as you can, but we can certainly help you out if you're running into roadblocks along the way. Please make sure you have adequate insurance, because your insurance is what covers your student athlete. Obviously, we have risk management pieces here. We've got staff that's highly trained, CPR, AED, bloodborne pathogens, and the list goes on. We have an athletic trainer, and we have staff that is responsible. However, insurance, make sure that you know what is covered as your student athlete is participating. Travel, a variety of different things might come up with travel permission. And so I can tell you in the past, for example, girls volleyball, when they go to Saturday morning invites, we do not always provide KML transportation. A lot of times it's easier for our families to travel, to an event that maybe is in Milwaukee by just leaving from their home. And so, long story short, you should be getting some dialogue from your student athlete's coach. There should be correspondence and communication. If any ride sharing is happening, just make sure, obviously, as parents, you're communicating. Busing in 2020, interesting topic. Some of our schools within the ECC in our conference have already decided how they're handling busing, which would be 1 student athlete per seat. A lot of them have said 2 student athletes per seat, and obviously you can't fit much more in the high school world. As of right now, we're sticking with 2 student athletes per seat, masks on the bus, we have sanitation stations in the bus, and then we'll have drivers who are expected to clean the buses when our athletes get off. Coaches will likely be doing temperature checks again before our athletes get on a bus to go to an away competition. So just some things to be ready for, especially as we start 2020. Obviously, there's physical risk. I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on this, but there is a reality that there is physical risk of participating in sport. So we're thankful that Nicole Volkman from Aurora is our trainer still. She's been here, I think this is her 6th year, I believe, at KML. Most of the kids know Nicole and really get to know her well over the 4 years here. She is wonderful. She's a great communicator. She is awesome at corresponding with physicians, with other athletic trainers, with physical therapists, whoever gets involved in the process if your student athlete is injured. She has some new procedures this year, so her office hours have changed a bit. You know Nicole's always here for events if you have any past experience with KML. So she has sideline coverage where she's on the sideline for any of our outdoor events, indoor as well. And then if we have bigger events, we separately contract her to make sure she's here for them. But her after-school hours, if it's just a practice night, have kind of changed. She'd usually be here floating around till 6 or 6:30. That might still happen. But Aurora has said that they want to make sure that they can have athletic trainers in the office a little more. And so her official hours, whether she follows them or not, that's on her, it's 2:30 to 4:30. Free injury analysis, we always like to tell folks, spread the word. Anyone here can have a free injury analysis through Nicole in her office. Just another blessing that she can do that service here and be part of the process as she refers to physicians and has follow-up appointments. She'll communicate with you as well. I think I hit on that a bit, but just expect that communication from her. Your coach will be part of the process as well, but really Nicole, if there is an ACL, a back, something that happens, Nicole's going to be the lead communicator. A couple different procedures for our student athletes to be aware of. So we're trying to make this as simple as possible. Basically, there's QR codes hanging on the wall in both the locker rooms and outside the trainer's room. Also, we'll have everything online regarding this information. But basically, kids are scanning. It's going to take you right to that questionnaire. Nicole will need to pre-screen before athletes enter her room. So she'll ask, the survey I should say, will ask COVID-related questions. She'll scan temperature, and then she can take 3 student-athletes in her room at a time. For some of you that have been involved with Kettle, you know her room can often become overwhelmed because kids like hanging out in there because they like Nicole. So this year especially, we're going to have to do our best to make sure we're helping her out with following that 3-person in the room procedure. Absence, this could be virtual absence if your student-athlete is starting virtually, or obviously in person. Could also be we close for 2 weeks perhaps, and then we go to virtual. Absence is absence. And so for the sake of our absence policy, obviously we'll have school procedure that helps us track absences, but we still have that same requirement that student-athletes must be in attendance for every class period. Obviously, if there's extenuating circumstances, that's different. If there's a doctor appointment, a dentist, a funeral, family plans of some sort that has been previously cleared, those are all different circumstances. And so our front office, they're the main communicators, but if there are extenuating circumstances, make sure that you involve myself and our pastor of student life, Pastor Randy Hughes, in the process, basically to clear any gray areas. For example, we have some student athletes who have known migraine issues where it's just something that continually plagues them all year long. So there have been some mornings where it's a game day, and where of course they want to be there, and they've had to say, I had to miss first hour, I was having a terrible migraine. And we've cleared stuff like that. So just to be totally transparent, there's not, again, a carte blanche approach to this. Just involve us in the process if there are extenuating circumstances. All of our student athletes are under what's called amateur status, and so they can't be paid as good as you are. You cannot receive cash or reimbursement for your athletic gifts and abilities in any way, shape, or form. School mementos exceeding $200, an award valued at more than $100. So those are WIAA policies, just something that I'm told to make you aware of. Now, you can receive other things, medals, cups, trophies, food, so on and so forth. Again, under $200. Eligibility applies to our full-time students. And so KML does not have a platform for strictly online students as some school districts do, not to be confused with virtual students. So our full-time enrolled students, whether they're here or they're deciding to attend virtually or it's some blended approach, obviously we're going to follow the school's lead, but you're a full-time enrolled student when you're on the books, basically, with our business department. So academics, 1.6 is the minimum GPA. We'd encourage you to stay high above that, but that is the minimum, and 1 failing mark. So if you get to the point where you're below a 1.6 or you have 2 Fs, our student services flags that, and they communicate with teachers and myself, who then communicate with coaches. And so we want to make sure you don't get there, but if you are ineligible, the minimum is 15 days. There are a lot of times at the end of semesters where projects aren't finished, homework is not in, stuff like that, which might lead to an ineligibility process. So ineligible or incomplete students may attend practice only until eligibility is reestablished. And so that's just really important that you're clear on that. It has to do with basically getting the homework in, fulfilling your responsibilities, and up until that, competition is out the door. And so getting it done quickly, practice is still an option, but the greater focus is going to be on obviously completing homework. Please be aware that if we have a snow day, especially I would say, that contests are not automatically canceled. So this may be a little different than the grade school approach. There are times where we have obviously terrible weather in the morning. We may cancel school just for the safety of our students, but it may clear up by 2 o'clock and we might have a 7 o'clock varsity game. So we're not always going to cancel if school is canceled in the morning. In general, we do our best to stay away from holidays, to stay away from Sundays, to do limited Saturdays, but just know that, especially cancellations, just pay attention to the main calendar, and your coaches should also communicate effectively with you. If it is a day of cancellation, which past years we've had a lot of them in the spring and in the winter, just be aware that you'll get more communication from us. So you'll probably get the normal email, but we'll also send out Power School alerts to make sure that you get every bit of information that you need. We do make announcements over the school PA so that coaches, teachers and students are aware of what's going on. So anything day of, basically we put all of our resources in to make sure you know what's going on. Uniforms, just a couple simple things. We do have a uniform cycle, and so we try to update our uniforms. It's about every 4 to 6 years, depending on the sport. Obviously, sports like football, the uniforms don't last as long. So we certainly need your help. If you can help us care for those uniforms, we would certainly appreciate that. So just a couple guidelines here. I'm not going to go over all these, as most of these are common sense. Volunteers. I think this year volunteering is going to look a little bit different, but we're still going to have roles for our volunteers, and we're still going to ask for your help. In a traditional year, again, admission and concession workers, we still plan on having concessions. We still want to have concessions and understand the value of being able to provide food when you're on campus. So we'll have plexiglass, volunteers will be masked and gloved, and we'll have different processes with lines and whatnot. So certainly we're still going to need your help. Charger Club runs fundraisers. If you're willing to help with any of those fundraisers, we could use your help there. Teams and coaches specifically will reach out to you if you have an interest in helping with taking stats, running scoreboard, filming, announcing, things like that. End of season gathering and awards nights is often picked up by certain grade levels, so the freshman parents or sophomore parents or so on and so forth. And so really appreciate your willingness to help out with all of that. Typically, we ask parents to help out 2 times during a given season. And so we'll get information out to you. Generally, we pre-assign games, and then if you have issues, we ask that you trade with individuals to fill your roles, and then communicate with us if there is any switching around so we know the plan as well. That's at KMLchargers.com. Again, that's under the More tab, and then I believe it's under Volunteers. Fall sports, they are going to happen. Pictures, rather. Fall sports too, but fall pictures are going to happen. And so they might look a little different. We're still deciding on the process and how we're going to safely take pictures, but we still see the value in them. So football, you can see the date there, volleyball, soccer, girls golf. If I were to click on this link, it would take you to our calendar, which you can itemize all the schedules. So there's even a link on there that says team pictures. And so if you click that, instead of sorting through day by day, which can be kind of overwhelming with our calendar, you can sort JV volleyball, freshman baseball, yearbook pictures. And so if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it talks about yearbook team pictures, and it has all the dates there for you as well. Just a reminder for athletes to bring their athletic masks, an early reminder for you on that day. Photo packages will come out. We work with Network Photography out of Jackson to provide those pictures to our parents. All right, I think that's all that I have for you. If you have any questions, again, just ask that you keep your mask on if you come up to the mic and speak as clearly and loudly into the mic as you can. If you are the first person, there's just an on-off switch. After anyone who is in here who has a question, Mr. Albrecht's up top helping us out. He's going to read off if there are any questions that came in through the queue. He's going to read those for us. Anyone have any questions? Mrs. Nasser, point. Just so our people online can hear us as well. There you go.
Test. The picture dates listed were not correct.
Okay, my apologies.
So just so you know, those will be shared once we know exactly what the WIA policies are.
Thank you. August 15th did seem too early for football. Thank you. If you do have questions and you just don't want to come up to the microphone, that's fine. We'll certainly be around afterwards to take questions. Mr. Albrecht, we have any questions up there?
There was one.
Sure.
There was a question on where limiting outside fans, families and such, are we limiting student spectators?
Yeah, so the student section discussion is an ongoing one that really starts with our conference. And so I'm going to look for our conference policy first, and then once we have a conference policy, that would be something that we would implement at KML. Again, I referenced our portable bleachers. If we have some way to be able to have our student section and perhaps 2 bleachers, I see the value of our students being at our games, and we want to be able to offer that, but obviously we're going to make sure we do it safely. And so once our conference decides on what our policy is on student athletes' attendance at games, then I will certainly make sure that you all know that policy as well. More information to come. It's kind of the overriding theme in our world right now and in athletics. Hope to know, again, a lot more. After August 14th, our ECC ADs are meeting the day after that meeting so that we can finalize conference things. Most of them start after Labor Day, so I've kind of had to make sure I light a fire under them because we start a whole lot sooner. Anything else, Mr. Albrecht? Good to go? All right, yes. Should be on now.
For an away event, is the expectation that students are taking the Kettle bus transportation to and back to Kettle after, or like do students possibly go home with parents after an event, or is the transportation with Kettle both ways?
Yep, good question. So most often, I'd say you're right in both cases. So our official policy is parents are in charge. So most often I can tell you what happens is that student athletes leave from KML, and then at the game, if parents are there, they communicate with the coach. And so, yeah, lots of times our students are going home with parents. So the bus typically is pretty full on the way there, and then on the way back, it's often slimmer. All right. Anyone else? Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and look forward to getting fall sports going and seeing you all around. Thank you.